the strange haunting of a sinister seabird. Unless God gave him some kind of grief, he left his house on at Pasari Kerbasi Street to go to Edernacapi Cemetery on that second Sunday of October, when it started to cool down a little, as he had done every Sunday morning for 2 years. Since he lost his father, his only survivor, 2 years ago, he was trying not to miss these cemetery visits, which he had made a habit of, because he could not break his bond with him. He didn't remember his mother. His father didn't talk about her much either. He only said she died. Liu, she's gone, to fill the child's imagination with the concept of mother when his mind first started to dawn. The two men lived together through years with bittersweet memories. Following his retirement from the postal administration, his father bought a small boat with some of his savings and headed to the Ikapi shore. The guy spent a lot of his money on this boat, sometimes sailing into the Bosphorus fishing and sometimes leaving his friends to their destinations. His grandfather, the late Mr. Fake, was one of the captains of the sailing company of Istanbul, and his father's love of the sea came from there. However, this love did not seem to affect him very much. Generally, he did not use ferries, boats, ferries and other sea vehicles unless he had to, and if he did, he would keep the sharpest mints and menthol colognes in his bag. Because he would feel seasick, he would feel dizzy at the slightest shaking, and his stomach would feel like it would fall into his mouth. He entered through the gate of Edernacapi Cemetery by stepping on the yellow and brown autumn leaves that stuck together due to the damp air and rain. Passing through the narrow roads, he found his father's grave. As he always did, he cleaned the garbage off him, sat on the edge and recited a prayer. He raised his head and looked at the sky. He felt the coolness of the grains of rain falling on his face from the rain clouds, sometimes dark and sometimes light gray, moving fast on a dirty white background. When he lowered his head and opened his closed eyes, he saw that strange seagull on the old grave to his leg, glaring at him, with a dark brown triangular spot on its chest, with its pointed corner pointing downwards. Even though he had been going to the cemetery for so long, he had never seen any other animal, especially a bird, except for the cats loitering at the entrance. Moreover, this strange seagull was moving low and right on the old stone pedestal, as if it were visiting the grave above it, pulling up the weeds on the ground with its beak and throwing them out of the grave, climbing on the tombstone and looking around. He was secretly disturbed by these strange movements of the animal. Even though he wanted to get up and read the tombstone out of curiosity, he took a step back, afraid of the animal that spread its wings simultaneously with his own movement and stuck its head straight at him without shouting. When he said, "Okay, I'm not doing anything, don't worry," and sat down again, the seagull also calmed down. He did not want to stay in the cemetery any longer, in the strange mood that this strange incident he experienced had given him. That night, he intended to read a few pages before going to bed again. He sat down in his chair in the corner of the balcony window, turned the switch on the floor lamp, and turned on the light. As he picked up Coleridge's The Old Sailor book, which he had started on the coffee table with enthusiasm and for some reason slowed down his reading pace over me, and opened the page with the folded paper he used as a bookmark, he was startled by a series of clear coming from the balcony. When he opened the window curtain, he saw the seagull in the cemetery standing on the wall and looking at him. Confused and frightened, he closed the curtain, thought for a moment that he might have been dreaming, and opened the curtain again. He saw that the seagull was right in front of the window, right under his nose, and exclaimed, "My God!" At this moment, the strange animal began to hit the glass with its beak and flap its wings as if threatening. He never thought that he could be afraid of a bird, but the seagull's knock on the window, the sound of its wings and the strange, speech-like sounds it made completely disturbed his peace, and he began to wander around the house, Ere this disaster that lasted about half an hour, he threw himself into bed and soon fell asleep. When he opened his eyes in the morning, the first thing that came to his mind was whether the event he experienced at night was real or a dream or a nightmare. He immediately got up and went to the balcony window. The balcony was empty. That day, the incident he had experienced that night was entirely on his mind. At work, people who sensed something odd about him would ask questions and he would dismiss the questions with trite answers and say he was fine. But he was having difficulty finding answers to the question marks in his mind. How did this strange animal find its place of residence? Also, while he was in the cemetery, he did not allow himself to get close to the grave he was walking on. To whom did the grave belong? Throughout the week the seagull's strange, more frightening than strange, almost maddening visits continued. Sometimes he was banging on the windows, sometimes knocking over the flower pots, trying to disturb his peace as much as he could. He endured the weekend being subjected to this ominous harassment every day. On Sunday, under the heavy rain that fell quickly but calmly under the protection of his umbrella and trench coat, he arrived at Eerie Cemetery without giving up his habit. As he approached his father's grave, he checked the grave next to him out of the corner of his eye, and the seagull was nowhere to be seen. After hurriedly reading prayer at his father's grave and performing his routine service, he headed to the adjacent grave. He cleaned the mud layer on the gravestone with his hand. When he saw the inscription on the tombstone, which was, Mr. Vefik the Madman, one of the captains of sailing company of Istanbul and all the Bosphorus paddle steamers, prayer to his soul, he heard the voice of the sinister animal, diving over his head, almost threatening him, waiting for an opportunity to attack. At that moment, a voice from behind called out, come back, get away from that grave. When he turned around, he saw an elderly man with a plaid cap covering his snow-white hair, his eyebrows and thick mustache hanging down the same color as his hair, and wearing a parka with a wide collar, similar to the ones worn by old captains. The evil animal was also perched on Mr. Vefik the Madman's tombstone, glaring at them. So what is this animal, mister? I swear, I don't understand. He came to my house last week. I don't know how he found it, how he did it, what he wants to do, what is the reason. That's enough if I know, he said. I swear, I don't know whether you call this a curse or an abomination, whether you believe it or not, but it is a rumor among sailors. If the merman person is an ill-fated, frightening, useless and evil person, a sinister seagull will be assigned to his grave upon his death. If he were to meet someone with whom he had animosity or a member of that person's family during his lifetime, he would not give that person peace due to his enmity. Tell me now, did you know Captain Vefik? Asked. As he was surprised, just as he was about to answer, the old man said, well, what a question of mine, at your age, may God forgive his negligence, how will you know Captain Vefik? Then tell me, are there any sailors in your family? He repeated his question. When he said, my grandfather was a sailor, even one of the captains of the sailing company of Istanbul, he said, really? What was his name? Asked the old man curiously. When he said Mr. Fake, that Captain Fake, a sad and thoughtful expression appeared on the old man's face. So you are Captain Fake's grandson. This actually explains everything. Your grandfather and this Captain Vefik had a feud that was nothing more than a blood feud, but one that could never be sweetened. At that meet, I was the second captain next to your grandfather. The deceased did not explain the origin of the issue to me, nor did I ask. No one knew for sure. Some people said it was a matter of the love story to a girl, and some others said it was a matter of money. But the only thing that is known is that no matter how much your grandfather ran away, Captain Vefik always pushed him. He always pushed him, but he was patient, but in the end he asked for early retirement. It was a strange struggle between them. As they walked together, he occasionally looked behind him at the ominous seagull perched on Captain Beffic's tombstone. Finally, they came to the gate of the cemetery. But how will I get rid of this animal? Every night at my house, every week here, it haunts me, it doesn't let go. When he was told this, the old man said, "You shouldn't get involved in such things. I mean, it's like magic, curses, etc. May God forgive me, what kind of words I said in the holy cemetery. You beer come to the Suhulat coffee house at the Malta stop, behind the Fadi Mosque, at 6 o'clock in the evening, and we will tell you how to get rid of this trouble," he said and walked away slowly. At 6 o'clock in the evening, he arrived at the Suhulat coffee house that the old man had told him about. A dozen old men, almost all over 75, were singing inside. The man in the cemetery who saw him excitedly raised his hand and motioned him to come to him. There were two other old men at the table. The man at the cemetery got right to the point. "This is the young man whose story I told you. Now tell me, captains, what should this child do to get rid of that evil animal?" One of the men at the table, a stocky man with red strands visible in his almost completely white beard, said, "Do you have anything belonging to Captain Fake, even a small thing? In order to leave this curse, you need to give your grandfather's belongings to that evil animal, saying like, 'Damn you, take it and go,' right, captains?" asked the third old man at the table. Nodded extremely slowly, without speaking. He had the vibe of being angry at everything and everyone and vowing never to speak to them again. The red-bearded captain said, "The night before he visits you, you show him what you will give him, and then you go to the cemetery. He will come ere you. If you leave your grandfather's belongings on the grave of Captain Beffic, you will be saved from this evil, that is, you need to get rid of it." This is what we heard, this is how it was explained. We should not confuse anything beyond that, he said. The man he met in the cemetery liked kicking him out of the coffee shop, saying, "In my opinion, there's nothing beer than tonight, find one of your grandfather's belongings and give it to the unlucky animal, don't waste your meat." He came home with thoughts in his mind and opened the wooden console where his parents' old belongings were kept, hoping to find something belonging to his grandfather. For a long me, he looked behind old photo albums and even inside the boxes containing sewing materials, but what he was looking for was not found in the old console, but somehow in the drawer of the relatively new nightstand next to it. His grandfather's old pipe, which he vaguely remembers, with a pitch black inside and still smelling of burnt tobacco. When he reached the living room with the pipe in his hand, the railing on the balcony window had started. But with the courage of knowing how to get rid of this evil, he quickly opened the curtain and shouted at the angry animal with the same anger, "You will take this and leave me alone, let's go." As soon as he stepped into the wet street, the Eerie seabird loomed over him. He hailed a taxi from the street and the taxi driver asked, "What are you doing in the cemetery at this hour, brother?" He sat in the back seat without answering the question. When he came to the gate of the cemetery that he always used, he was happy to realize for the first meet that there was no guardhouse around that gate. Because he had neither the patience nor the me to deal with a guard at that hour. When he quickly reached the second where his father's and Captain Beffic's grave were located, the evil animal landed on the gravestone, squealing, "Take it and leave me alone, you evil animal, damn you," he said, and threw his grandfather's pipe into Captain Beffic's grave. At that moment, lightning struck, illuminating everything. When it became brighter, he thought he saw the old captains, including the old man he had seen in the cemetery that day, watching him just ahead. The strange animal took the pipelet in the grave between its beak and flew away, disappearing in the sky. At the end of a few weeks, when the evil seagull did not visit him, he went to Suhulit Coffee House and wanted to thank the old captains on a Sunday afternoon. The only thing that he found will be and saw was that an abandoned coffee house which has old lock with a chain on the door. The wooden joinery had fallen off in places, and inside there were at least 25 years old wooden chairs and tables, led to its fate.